Hello and welcome back. Up till now we've done limits that we could solve by simple substitution. And that should always really be step one with any limit problem that you're trying to solve. Try and see if you can substitute, and if you can, then you don't really need to do anything else. You just get your answer and you're done. But if you substitute and you end up with something weird, say like 0 over 0, or like, you know, infinity, or infinity over infinity, or 1 to the infinity, or something weird like that, then these are actually called indeterminate forms. Determinate forms. And when you end up with an indeterminate form, you need to use some different approach to solve them, because substitution just doesn't work when you do that. So let's try one of these problems that we end up with 0 over 0 or something like that. So let's say we had the limit as b tends to 1. And I just chose b, it's a variable. It could be x, it could be theta, it could be anything. But let's say we had the limit as b tends to 1 of b squared plus b minus 2 over b squared minus 1. And so if we substitute in this problem, we can see that that equals 1 squared plus 1 minus 2 over 1 squared minus 1. And 1 squared plus 1 is 2, 2 minus 2 is 0. And 1 squared minus 1, well, that's just 1 minus 1, and that's 0 too. So we can't just, do that, because substitution gives us an indeterminate form. So we have to try something else to try and to solve this problem. So let me erase this. Pick a color. Okay, so when we look at this problem, well, I see that maybe we could factor it, because it looks like something I've factored before in algebra, and maybe if I factor it, I can, simplify it, because you have to just try and simplify it the best you can. And factoring is one of the ways you can use to simplify it. So let's try and factor this. Let's start with the numerator first. So that's b squared plus b minus 2. And let's factor this. So if you remember from algebra, to factor something that looks like this, you need to find two numbers. Well, first of all, it's b plus or minus something times b plus or minus something, and figure out the two factors, or the two numbers. You need to find two numbers that multiply to this, and they add to the coefficient of this. So what are two numbers that multiply to -2, but they add to 1? Well, the numbers are 2 and -1. And we can see that 2 times -1 is -2, and 2 minus 1, or 2 plus -1 is 1. So it's b plus 2 and b minus 1. That's a minus. And if you're not sure if this is correct, you can always go and you can actually multiply it out and see if it works. So let's do that actually. Let's do b plus 2 times b minus 1. And so that's b squared minus b plus 2b minus 2. And so this further reduces to b squared minus b plus 2b is plus b, and then minus 2 is just a minus 2. And this looks exactly the same as this. It is exactly the same as that, so this is correct. So let me erase some of this. Get that there. Get this out from here. Okay, so right now we know what the numerator is. We know this is the numerator. That's a check mark. That's not an exponent. Um, and so let's try and factor the denominator too. So the denominator is b squared minus 1, and this is, well, we don't have we don't have three not expressions, but three terms right here. So, but this is pretty much the same thing as saying b squared plus 0b. That's not ob, it's 0b minus 1, because 0 times b is it's the same as saying b squared minus 1. So we can use this to help us if we use that's to multiply to that, that's to add up to that. So what are two numbers that multiply to negative 1 and add to 0? Well, that's 1 and negative 1. If you add these, you get 0, and if you multiply them, you get negative 1. So the denominator will be b plus 1 times b minus 1. Remember, this is also b minus 1. I know it looks kind of weird. And so if we weren't sure, again, we can do this. We can try this out. B plus 1 times b minus 1 is b times b is b squared. 1 times b is plus b. B times negative 1 is negative b. And 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. So you can see that the plus b and the minus b cancel out. And so you end up with b squared minus 1, which is exactly the same as this. So now you factor both the numerator and denominator. And let me erase some of this. Right there. So you're left with this right here, and you don't forget, always, if you haven't done any substitution yet, you always have to write the limit as b tends to 1 of this. So this simplifies to this. And now that we can see that b minus 1 is here and b minus 1 is here, so we can cancel them out. And all we're left with is the limit as b tends to 1 of b plus 2 over b plus 1. So now we can go back and we can substitute, and this equals b, we put in 1 for b, so that's 1 plus 2 over, and then b plus 1, when we substitute 1 for b, is 1 plus 1. And so that equals 3 over 2. And so that's your answer. There's not really, the first thing you should always do is substitute, and if you see something that you can factor, I think it's always a good idea. The second thing you should always do is factor it out, because usually you end up with two terms that you can cross off, and then you can figure out, the rest of the answer. But if you see something that looks like you can factor it, the best idea is to factor it. Sometimes you won't be able to factor, and there are other ways and other methods to solve, which I'll be going through in the next few videos on limits. So yeah, keep watching, and if you have any questions, you can email me at utamatchboxman@gmail.com.